Good morning and welcome to 365 Days of Stories with the Omer. Here we are at day 61 and we're continuing with the legend of the Rose of the Alhambra. As you might remember, Reyes de Alarcón was his name. Anyway, he had retrieved the gyre falcon of the queen and had come down the stairs. And remember, he'd just been completely taken by the beautiful Jacinta. And she had dropped her spool of silk and he'd picked it up to return it. And as he did, he took her hand in his and kissed it. And she said something to the effect of, Ave Maria. And anyway, so then they were really unable to communicate with each other. They were just, tongue-tied, peering in each other's eyes, and a lot went on in that silence to communicate the love that they were both feeling for each other. Well, just as Reyes was beginning to get composed again and regain his ability to speak, suddenly they heard in the distance a shrill voice. And it was Jacinta's aunt calling out to her. And Jacinta said to Reyes, this is my auntie. You must go. You must fly quickly. Adios, senor, she said to Reyes. And Reyes looked at her and said, I cannot go unless you will give me that rose that is in your hair as a remembrance. And she quickly took the rose out of her hair and placed it in his hand. And as she did so, he took her hand again and kissed it many times. And then he leapt up and off he went quickly through the garden before Jacinta's aunt could see him or know anything about him being there. She did walk in and she could see the agitation that was in her young niece. And she asked, what has gone on? What has happened with you? And Jacinta replied, well, there was a falcon that came into the tower. And her aunt said, oh my, really? A falcon coming into our tower? Not even a single bird in a cage is safe these days. Well, things went on. And unbeknownst to the auntie, there were meetings between Reyes and Jacinta. And during those meetings, he pledged eternal fidelity to Jacinta, she to him. There was a day, though, where King Philip and Isabella, the queen, decided that they were going to move away from the Alhambra, from Granada, and take everything, take their whole assembly, everyone that served them, to another place. Now, Jacinta's aunt was happy about this. And as the whole royal retinue made its way out through the gates of Granada and on, she watched as that last horse disappeared out of sight. And she felt exalted by this because she had protected her niece through all this time from any of those rambunctious young men around the court. Because through her time as a woman, she had become, more and more she developed more and more of a negative view of the opposite sex. So she thought she'd won at this point. Everyone had gone. Her niece was still safe and unscathed. And as she had watched the last horse disappeared, she turned to come back to the tower. What did she see in the garden but a beautiful white Arabian steed pawing at the ground? And there outside on a bench was her Jacinta with a handsome young man kneeling before her. He gently kissed her hand and bid her adieu, leapt over a little hedge of shrubs, jumped upon his horse, and was off. The auntie came up and was, Jacinta, who was this? Oh, Jacinta was, at this point, heartbroken, and she just leapt up and ran to her auntie's arms and hugged her. And all she could say, he is gone, he is gone, he is gone. Well, Jacinta's aunt inquired, who is this? Who was this person? And Jacinta told him he was, a page in the court and a favorite of the queen, and his name was Riz de Alarcon, and the auntie was like, see, I told you to be careful about these young men. When did you ever meet him? Well, it was the day that the falcon came into the tower. No falcon is as dangerous as these types of young men. Well, Jacinta tried to stand up for Riz, but the auntie just went on, and she said, there's just no way he'll ever come back. I know the hearts of these young men. Certainly he will be off serenading some other woman. Just watch and you will see. Riz was gone. He was gone with the king and the queen. And time passed. That summer turned into fall. Fruits ripened, dropped to the ground. Snow eventually came, as did the winter, and the Sierra Nevada was covered with snow. And that winter then turned into the spring again, and flowers began to bloom, and all looked as if it would be well. But just as a stream passes, perhaps Riz de Alarcon had passed as well, wishing the fair Jacinta love along the way, but then drifting on, perhaps to look at more beautiful flowers along its bank. Jacinta was distraught. Her auntie could see this, and she tried to console the young maiden by telling her she was better off without him. He would never come anyway, and that he was from this very noble family, that even if he asked for her hand in marriage, his father would never approve of it, because she was an orphan at this point, and her family was gone, and she had no wealth. This did not help things out at all. She sank into a deeper grief, deeper and deeper. Well, one night her aunt had gone to bed, and she was sitting by the fountain, very sad, and her tears were dropping into the fountain. Tear by tear, drop by drop. As they did, the waters began to be agitated. And suddenly from the waters, a woman's apparition appeared. Faint it was, but clearly it was a woman in beautiful garments with dark flowing hair. And as she came up out of the fountain, Jacinta could not believe her eyes. She rose up in a moment and dashed off in fear. I did not return to that fountain until the next morning. All seemed to be still, but she knew what she had seen, and she shared the story with her aunt. Her aunt said, come on, you were probably dreaming. You fell asleep by the fountain, I'm sure. Jacinta was, no, I know what I saw. Well, maybe it is Zorahayda, one of the 3 princesses that was kept here at the tower. Of course you know the story, don't you? Jacinta said, no, I don't know this story. Oh, yes, there were 3 princesses lived here. Zayda, Zorahayda, and Zorahayda. And 3 Spanish cavaliers had come to win their hands in marriage, and they designed that they would fly with them, elope. Now, the 2 oldest, Zayda and Zorahayda, had made their commitment to them and descended a rope ladder and fled away. But Zorahayda was in such conflict she could never get herself to leave. It is said she was always sorrowful for that. She lived here in the tower alone and supposedly died here in the tower. Perhaps it is her apparition that you are seeing. Oh, that fair Zorahayda. Now I do remember the story, Jacinta said. I do. Well, you should be happy for what Zorahayda did, because that Spanish cavalier that she was going to marry, well, he eventually gave up on his Moorish bride and married a Spanish princess, and is from the 2 of those that you are descended. You should do the same. Give up on this Reyes de Alarcon, just as Zorahayda's Spanish lover had to give up on her. Well, this did not help matters out at all. And inwardly, Jacinta was thinking about a lot of things. And she thought to herself, if that apparition is really Zorahayda, then I have nothing to fear. And she resolved that she would sit again at the fountain and see if the apparition would appear to her again. And we'll leave the story there and pick it up tomorrow. The Rose of the Alhambra. Okay, have a good rest of your day, and thanks for joining.